Coastal Plains of the World. Written by Edward Allen Kurtz.
Contents at a glance.
What is a coastal plain? It is land that lies along the coast of a sea or ocean. It is an area that is flat and low. A coastal plain usually lies between the coastline and a landform, inland, like a hill or a mountain range. Coastal plains can be very wide. The flat area between the ocean and a mountain can stretch for hundreds of miles, or they can be narrow. The mountain or hill is close to the ocean. Coastal plains can also be long. For example, the Atlantic coastal plain is 2,200 miles long. Let's learn more about coastal plains. How coastal plains are formed. There are two ways that coastal plains can be formed. The first way is when a coastal plain starts as a continental shelf. A continental shelf is a large, flat piece of land that lies along a continent, but is under the ocean. If the level of the ocean water falls, then the continental shelf becomes a coastal plain. The second way that a coastal plain can be formed is when rivers carry lots of rocks and soil on their way to the ocean. After many years, these rocks and soil can start to build up, and a flat coastal plain is created. Ocean animals in Kansas? Do you know what a fossil is? Fossils are remains or prints of animals in rocks from thousands of years ago. A dinosaur bone is an example of a fossil. Kansas is a state in the United States. It lies exactly halfway between the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. How is it possible that scientists have found fossils of marine animals in Kansas, in the middle of North America, so far away from either ocean? At one time, the area that is now Kansas was a continental shelf that later became part of a huge coastal plain. Natural resources. A natural resource is something that comes from nature and that people can use. For example, the wind is a natural resource. If you build a windmill, you are using the natural resource of the wind. There are many natural resources that are found in coastal plains. Trees often grow in coastal areas, and these can be used for lumber and paper. Sand and small rocks can be used to make cement. Clay is used to make pottery and bricks. Other natural resources found in coastal plains include minerals, oil, and natural gas. Famous coastal plains, the Albanian coastal plain. The Republic of Albania is a country on the western side of the Balkan Peninsula in southeastern Europe. Its 300-mile coastline lies along the Adriatic Sea and the Ionian Sea, both of which are part of the larger Mediterranean Sea. Albania is a very small country, and 70% of its landscape is made up of mountains. There is a very narrow coastal plain that faces the Adriatic Sea. This coastal area once contained wetlands. They were drained, and now the area is used to grow citrus fruits, corn, and wheat. Famous coastal plains, the Arctic coastal plain. The Arctic coastal plain is found in northern Alaska. It is a low, flat area that includes lakes, streams, tundra, and wetlands. Under the tundra, there is a layer of permafrost. This means that the ground under the tundra is always frozen. There are many kinds of animals that live here. Some are migratory birds that come here from all over the world. One bird, the godwit, flies for 9,000 3,000 miles from New Zealand to this coastal plain every year, and then back again. There are also caribou, polar bear, Arctic fox, and musk ox. Famous coastal plains, the Atlantic coastal plain. The Atlantic coastal plain is a large plain that stretches for 2,200 miles along the Atlantic Ocean. This plain includes parts of the following U.S. states from south to north: Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Maryland, Delaware, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. It also includes Washington, D.C. Like most coastal plains, it is a flat and low-lying area. The Atlantic coastal plain is between 30 and 60 miles wide. Parts of it are very wet with lots of rivers, marshes, and areas of swampland. Famous coastal plains, the Gulf coastal plain. The Gulf coastal plain surrounds the Gulf of Mexico and includes parts of the southern United States and eastern Mexico. U.S. states that lie in the Gulf coastal plain include Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, Missouri, Mississippi, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Texas. Most of the plain is flat, and there are many rivers, streams, and wetlands. Plants in the Gulf coastal plain include grasses and trees like pine trees, and there are many animals like alligators, frogs, pelicans, and seagulls. Famous coastal plains, India's eastern coastal plains. India's eastern coastal plains are found between the Eastern Ghats and the Bay of Bengal. The Eastern Ghats are a range of mountains along India's eastern coast. The Bay of Bengal is a large bay that is part of the Indian Ocean. India also has its western coastal plains, but its eastern coastal plains are wider and quite flat. They range between 60 and 80 miles wide. Many of India's rivers drain into this coastal plain, and Lake Chilika, the largest saltwater lake in India, is located here. There is also much rain here. Famous coastal plains, India's western coastal plains. India's western coastal plains lie between the Western Ghats Hills and the Arabian Sea on the west coast of India. The Arabian Sea, like the Bay of Bengal, is part of the Indian Ocean. While India's eastern coastal plains can be as wide as 80 miles, these western coastal plains are only about 30 miles wide. The plains are made up of three sections: the northern Konkan, the central Kanad Plain, and the southern area of the plains, which is called the Malabar Coast. Fish farming is popular along the western coastal plains. Famous coastal plains, South Africa's coastal plain. The country of South Africa, at the southern tip of Africa, has deserts, snow-covered mountains, grasslands, and a coastal plain. Along South Africa's eastern shoreline is a coastal plain that borders the Indian Ocean. This coastal plain varies in width from 40 miles to 150 miles. Most of the plain is flat and level, and some of it is made up of gently rolling hills. There are many streams and rivers that flow into this coastal plain. Mangrove swamps are found along the edge of the plain, where it meets the Indian Ocean. Famous coastal plains, South America's eastern coastal plain. South America's eastern coastal plain is found along the northeastern coast of Brazil. It lies in Brazil's state of Rio Grande do Norte, along the Atlantic Ocean on the eastern side of the continent of South America. This coastal plain is hot because it lies near the equator. It is also very dry. This is unusual because most of the rest of Brazil is very rainy. This is because the higher areas of Brazil push the wet sea air away from the coastal plains. This area is famous for its beaches, its sand dunes, and its clean air. Famous coastal plains, South America's western coastal plain. South America's second coastal plain lies on the west of the continent along the Pacific Ocean in Peru and Chile. Like the eastern coastal plains, it is very dry in the western coastal plain, but for a different reason. The Pacific Ocean is cold here. This makes cool air at sea level and warmer air above. Clouds form, but they do not produce rain. The Atacama Desert is found in this coastal plain. It is known as the driest place in the world. It only gets about 0.04 inches of rain per year, and in some parts of this desert, it has never rained. Interesting facts. The Gulf coastal plain stretches from the Gulf of Mexico northwards for about 500 miles. When ice melts in the summer in the Arctic coastal plain, lakes called thawed lakes cover the soil. Scientists have found fossils of aquatic birds in Kansas, so they know that there was an ocean here at one time with marine fish. Some of the rivers that drain into India's eastern coastal plains include the Godavari, Kavari, Krishna, and Mahanadi. Fishing is often an important source of income for people who live along many of the coastal plains around the world. Clay that is found in coastal plains can be used for many things like detergents and even kitty litter. Agriculture can be important in some coastal plains. The soil is often good because of the nutrients brought to the plains from the many streams and rivers. There are 18 big rivers that flow through South Africa's coastal plain because of high rainfall and the narrowness of the plain. Native Americans lived along the Atlantic coastal plain for many years without causing damage to the plain, but today many trees have been cut. Wetlands are polluted, and wildlife is in danger. Some of the natural resources found along the Gulf coastal plain include trees, fish, shrimp, and oil and natural gas. Limestone is a natural resource that is often found in coastal plains, and because the soil is thin, it is easy to find the limestone. The famous city of Goa lies in India's western coastal plains.